Welcome to the Center for Universal Oneness. We are an open, welcoming, spiritual community that supports all faith traditions and invites you to join us on your spiritual journey. We host different speakers each week to guide and inspire us. We are guided by universal principles of acceptance of all that is sacred, and we strive to live in the oneness of love. Please enjoy this presentation.
Rita Marie Johnson, you're back. Yay, good to see you. She is going to talk to us on the joy of birthing Christ consciousness. And it's going to be an interesting journey as we go through this. I have seen the video, and it's going to be amazing to watch. Rita Marie has created a series of trainings and programs that are about being peaceful and being peace, and the the completely connected book that is all about our oneness, mostly about our oneness. And she is a perfect person to be speaking to us. And so, Rita Marie, welcome back. It is great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm just delighted always to be with you. You know, it always feels like coming home. I just really love it. And of course, having my sister here is such a joy too. Loved your prayer. So today, friends, I'm coming to you from Laguna Beach. We were visiting a little bit about that earlier. So that's why I have all of these sparkly lights behind me. Sorry if they're distracting, but this is the best place in my sister-in-law's condo that I could sit. And so we're blessed to have her condo to stay in. And I understand it's about, 30 degrees in Kansas City today. Is that right? About 30 or so. So, yeah. So I decided I'd wear my new beach hat. See my beach hat here. And just try to give you the benefit of a little beach joy to help you out there in Kansas City this morning. So actually, of course, that is our topic for the day, is joy. And specifically, the joy of birthing Christ consciousness. Now, when you think about birthing Christ consciousness, I wonder if any questions come up. I'm going to do a little screen share here. Maybe you're a bit like this explorer here. Whoops, trying to get the, just a second, trying to get the big picture up. There it is. So, you know, it's kind of a concept that is so big and so mysterious still in many ways that you might have a lot of questions about it. And so I'm going to start this morning with a few questions. I'm just guessing that most of you have been on the spiritual path and wanting to understand Christ consciousness for many years. If that's true for you, would you raise your hand? So I can just, I can see all of you on the screen. So yeah, I don't see anybody who's a newcomer to this. All right. So I'm curious, do you remember when you first became aware of this divine identity? Was it a joyful time for you? When you first were able to maybe talk about it? Maybe it was when you first came to a center like this one. But was it a joyful time? I'm just curious if you have a memory of when you had an awakening, a first awareness of this. So for me, it was like a birth, really. I remember it being a time of so much joy and wonder. I walked around most of the time with a smile on my face. I was a little bit blissed out, you could say, when I fully got the understanding of what it meant to be a divine self, to have that Christ consciousness within me. But you all have been on the spiritual path a long time now. You've heard the words Christ within probably for years. Isn't that right? You know that concept. You've heard it. And it seems to me, after being on the spiritual path for so many years, that we come to have like a deep contentment. It's not like blissed out joy. It's more like deep contentment to know who we are, to have a sense of our divine identity. I'm just curious, is that true for you? Do you sort of sense this divine contentment, this alignment with self? All right. At the same time, I'm wondering if you ever yearn to have that sense of joy from that new awareness. You may remember it, but wondering if you might yearn for having more of that feeling back. Deep contentment is good, but all out joy is fabulous too. How many, I really am curious about that question. Can I see how many of you wish you could sort of get back there? All right. Okay. Well, I can relate to that. And in the last few months, I've been captivated by a BBC series called Call the Midwife. Anybody watch Call the Midwife? Can I see your hands on that? Oh, quite a few. All right. Yay. Because you'll really be able to understand what I'm about to share. So when I first saw this show, I was actually kind of shocked to see that they were showing women in the throes of labor. And then actually you see the tiny head coming out, and then the whole baby, and then the midwife holds the naked baby up in all its glory. And you know, I have seen this repeatedly in this show now. They are so literal in the way that they show birth. And I've never had children. And so for me, this experience of seeing these babies born has brought me to tears time after time. I'm wondering if anybody else who watches this show has been moved to tears at times when the baby comes out. It's just like, ta-da, you know, there's such joy. It just overwhelms you. It's like this spontaneous joy. So I've been telling friends about this show and urging them to watch it as a way to combat the pandemic blues. I don't know if any of you got hooked on this series as a way to stay in joy. You know, the whole show brings me joy, not just the moments of birth, but certainly when they show an actual birth, it's just, I'm so in touch with this sort of primal joy that comes from that experience. So in light of the Christmas season, I got to thinking about Mary and the birth of Jesus. And I realized that in all the years that I have contemplated the nativity story, I know the story, you know, the journey and getting to the stable, and then my mind just goes to there's Jesus in the manger. You know, I never really contemplated Mary in labor and the literal birth of Jesus. And so I'd like to share this video with you, and so we can go back in time to that historic moment. So I'm just wondering if that brings joy to your heart, you know, that moment of celebration. It's really, like I said, a primal joy in a sense. It goes so deep in us. It's so spontaneous. So the only joy that I can compare that to really is that sort of spiritual awakening that, you know, when you're walking around with a smile on your face all the time and you're just in wonder about this divine identity that you've discovered. That is the birth of Christ consciousness, this new awareness of who you are. And being able to see yourself differently, an identity that is love and wisdom and imagination and strength and all of these divine qualities. What a wonder that is. So I'd like to screen share again here to just show you a quote from Charles Fillmore, what he had to say about this. So he said, we must perceive the real man, or we could call it the divine self, is constantly coming forth. This is the meaning of Christmas. It does not belong to the past. It's a vital, living, present truth. The bringing forth of the Christ child is not a work that's finished in Bethlehem. It's taking place in our midst every day. It is this we celebrate. But how, friends, do we keep that, the spontaneous joy of it, alive in the midst of a world that's ravaged by tornadoes, by violence, by COVID? How do we keep that sense of wonder and joy alive every day, as Charles is saying here? Well, let's look at what Myrtle had to say about it. So Myrtle Fillmore said, when you truly go to the Christ within yourself, the Christ consciousness, instead of to your own thoughts, you will receive whatever you need. So let's think about that. She says, when you go to the Christ within, you will receive whatever you need. So what happens inside us when we receive what we need? You know, when we've needed something and we go inside and we connect with that divine consciousness, and then we receive an idea, an awareness, whatever it is, what happens is we're grateful for getting our need met, but even more, we feel loved. When we know we can go there and get our needs met, there's this sense of love, like, oh my gosh, no, my prayer's been answered, or what I dreamed of has manifested. And then what comes after feeling loved? Joy, right? The joy can't help but follow when we know we're loved, when our needs are met. So that is the divine pattern. That is the experience of how we get to joy. But how can we live in it more consistently? How can we have that sense of birth, like when they hold the baby up? How can we recapture that kind of joy more regularly? Well, last Sunday, I did a message for the connection practice community on having less stress and more bliss. So when I was giving this message, I talked about the importance of acknowledging our addiction to venting. I was just talking about, you know, we spend a lot of time venting. And for example, when it comes to technology, I love to vent when things don't go how I want them to. And that's often the case. I want to vent because it feels so good in the moment to vent, but it does reinforce limited thinking and those negative emotions. So when I'm venting, what am I doing? I'm creating suffering, which is the opposite of birthing my Christ consciousness, the opposite of feeling joy and birthing Christ consciousness in me. So I know that, and I am really working in my life actually about moving from any venting to just birthing Christ consciousness. And I do that by achieving heart-brain coherence. Now, I've talked to you all, I'm sure several times, about the power of heart-brain coherence. I'm just going to review the steps real quickly. It's focusing down into our hearts and then breathing as if breathing through the heart, and then feeling appreciation for something that just makes your heart sing. And in my case, I use my dog Millie. She just very consistently gets me into coherence. And when I'm able to do that instead of venting, then I can continually be in that joy, birthing Christ consciousness. So I've been teaching coherence for many years. And when I taught it last Sunday in this message about less stress and more bliss, an old friend showed up. I hadn't seen this friend for many years, and she was still on our mailing list. And so here she is on the screen. Let's call her Sandra. So Sandra knew about coherence. I had taught it to her many years ago, but she hadn't been practicing it in her life. So this message I did was a refresher for her and for other people who know about coherence, but they're not actually doing it regularly in their lives. So that was the message. And I was surprised on Monday morning, in other words, the morning after I gave this message, I get a call from Sandra. Now, Sandra is a friend who has never called me up before. We have been in person actually in Costa Rica and in other places in the US, but we never had a phone relationship, not that kind of friendship. And here she is on a Monday morning calling me up. And she said, I just had to tell you what happened after I heard your message last night, after we were practicing coherence. She said, I have been getting phone calls from a homeless woman. I don't know how she got my number, but she has been calling me up and saying something about some papers that she needs, and she needs some help getting some papers. And it just irritates me. I feel invaded. I don't know where she got my number, and she just continues to call me, and I just hang up on her. Well, last night, after being in coherence, she happened to call me. And this time when I answered, my heart was open and I decided to hear her out. And I am amazed. I have decided to help this woman. She had found my number on the internet, on an organization's list that I volunteer for. And she thought I could help, and I'm gonna help her. I can't believe I'm doing this. This was such a change of heart. Friends, what happened? She birthed Christ consciousness. You get it? She had such a change of heart. This is birthing Christ consciousness, helping someone with an open heart. So I was so touched by her example. And then I want to share another example that happened this last week, because I've been so acutely aware recently of the power of coherence to help us stay in the joy of birthing Christ consciousness. So last Wednesday, I'd had a really full day. I'd been Zooming regularly, just one meeting after another. I'd had some things happen that weren't fun to deal with, some challenges. I had just one thing after another last Wednesday, from like 8 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. So very, very full day. And at the end of the day, I realized that my head just felt wired. It felt weird. I felt like something was wrong. And so I thought, am I going to vent about having too much to do and probably make this even worse? Or shall I try getting coherent? So I thought, I'm going to try coherence. I got down on the floor with my dog, Millie. I put my arms around Millie, and I moved into the 3 steps of coherence, focusing down in my heart, breathing as if breathing through my heart, and feeling appreciation for Millie. After about 3 or 4 minutes, I decided to take my blood pressure again. It was, instead of high like it had just been, really high, more than I'd ever had in my life, I had my blood pressure back down to normal, and the weird feeling in my head was gone. Now, I've never tried anything like that before with coherence, but what is that, friends? The Christ consciousness healed me like that. You get it? I moved into my heart, into Christ consciousness, that feeling of joy and oneness. And in 3 or 4 minutes, my blood pressure went from higher than I'd known it to be back to normal. That's what Christ consciousness does for us. And sometimes we forget it can be that immediate, but with heart-brain coherence, it truly can. Now, of all the examples of the immediacy of coherence helping us live in the joy of Christ consciousness, because I certainly felt such joy after getting my blood pressure back down to normal. But the best example ever happened when I was in Vancouver doing a workshop at a peace conference years ago. And in my workshops, I always invite a volunteer to come forward so I can demonstrate the power of heart-brain coherence by, I put an ear sensor on their ear, which is attached, this little ear sensor is attached to the biofeedback software in the computer, and I measure their heart-brain coherence. So in this workshop, I asked for a volunteer to come forward so I could do that demonstration. So this woman raises her hand and she comes forward, and let's call her Nancy. So Nancy put the ear sensor on, and when I do this demonstration, the first thing I do is I try to stress the person out, because I need to show the difference between stress and coherence. And so I was trying to stress her out. So I asked her to count backwards from 100 by 8s, like 100 minus 8 and that number minus 8 and so on. So as she did this, she was in high coherence. The software indicated this woman was in high coherence. This math did not throw her off at all. So I thought, well, maybe she's just good at math and doesn't, bother her to have to do math, and doesn't bother her to have people that she doesn't know all looking at what's going on inside her. Normally when people do this, they feel so vulnerable and the technology kind of scares them, and it's not as easy to move into high coherence. But this woman started in high coherence and she sustained high coherence. And I tried several different ways to stress her out. I asked her if there was anything stressing her out in her life. And she said, no, I stay calm. And I'm going, geez, we got a saint here. I could not get this woman stressed out. She was just in this high coherence and nothing was going to shake her off of it. So after the workshop was over, I went up to her and said, Nancy, how in the world did you do that? She said, well, when I was a little girl, I was in a very dysfunctional family and I was battered. I was emotionally and physically abused, and they would put me in the closet for long periods of time without food and water. And she said, so one day when I was in the closet, I came across, I just sort of stumbled onto what you're teaching here today. She said, I didn't ever know anybody could teach it. But when I was in the closet, I found what is like my happy place. I found the place of joy inside me, what made me feel happy. And I just had this feeling that this could protect me, that if I could just stay in that feeling of happy joy, if I could just do it no matter what they did, that it would protect me. And so she said, that's why I'm a happy, healthy person today, because I just kept going back to that feeling. And it did protect me from the terrible consequences of trauma. So many people suffer from their childhoods, but somehow I stumbled on this and it protected me. This little girl, friends, she had nobody to vent to. Right? There was nobody listening, nobody to vent to hear her. And so instead, she discovered this Christ consciousness. She birthed it that day somehow by the grace of God, and she stayed in it. That's the most amazing story I've ever heard of birthing Christ consciousness and nurturing that Christ consciousness to stay happy and healthy your whole life through. And so, friends, it's true that we are living in a world that is stressful, sometimes ravaged by tornadoes. They're in the Midwest. I'm sure you're, very aware of that. I grew up there. I know what that's like, and COVID and all the things that are stressful in our time. But if this young girl could stumble across that experience that coherence takes us to, helps us to stay in the feeling of joy that protects us and helps us respond from our highest intelligence, from our best intelligence, from our divine intelligence. If that young girl could do that, I know I can too. Can we do that, friends? Can I see hands? Can we learn to stay in Christ consciousness more consistently, getting to that feeling of joy that we may have had when we first discovered the Christ within, and how we can keep coming back and back and back, creating it over and over again. So I'd like to invite you this year in 2022 to practice those 3 simple steps: heart focus, heart breathing, and heart feeling of appreciation, to live in the joy of birthing Christ consciousness more consistently in your lives. And I'd like to make a beginning with you right now. We're going to go into the meditation. But before we do, I'd like to invite you to think of something that you vented about this week. Can you think of something that you vented about? Something happened and you just went into vent mode. I'm going to give you a minute to think about that, because sometimes we do it and then we forget about it. We put it out in the world and then it's over and we forgot we've vented. But our venting keeps us in suffering. So anybody need more time to think of something you vented about this week? Let me see your hand if you need a little time to think about it. All right. So if you've got that, now I'm going to ask you also to think about what it is that makes your heart sing. For me, because I've used my dog Millie for years, I can get into coherence like that. That served me, really. When I had the high blood pressure, getting to Millie in my heart served me to get that blood pressure down. So what is there in your life that is like that? What is it that makes your heart just sing, brings a big smile, completely positive? Anybody need a little more time to think about that? Anybody need more time? All right. So when we move into this meditation, I'm going to first invite you to bring into your memory, into your heart, the memory of venting. And then I'm going to invite you to instead turn toward the Christ consciousness by filling your heart with the joy of what makes your heart sing. And then after you get to that place of joy where you have birthed your own Christ consciousness, I invite you to just listen inside to what that Christ consciousness has to say to you today about the venting or about whatever is up for you, to just listen within and just see what comes. And after a few minutes, then I'll invite you to open your eyes. All right. Shall we give it a try, friends? All right. All right. So I invite you to just get comfortable there at home, wherever you are. Get comfortable in your chairs. And I'm going to tell you something about the hand on the heart. When we put our hands on our hearts, did you know that we get a little surge of the oxytocin hormone? This oxytocin is the love hormone. So simply by putting the hand on the heart, you're halfway there to getting into the joy. The hand on the heart stimulates the love hormone in us, the bonding hormone, the mother-child bonding hormone. So that's what we get when we put our hands on our hearts. All right, so with hand on heart, and eyes closed, just invite you now to focus down into the heart. Down into the heart we go, dropping all the energy down. Heart focus. And now breathing deeply and rhythmically, as if you're breathing through the heart. Heart breathing. And now, friends, I invite you to bring into your heart that memory of yourself venting. Just see yourself in your heart there, going into that regular routine of venting. And now I invite you to fill your heart instead with whatever it is that makes your heart sing, whatever it is that brings a big smile to your face, to your heart, to fill yourself with the joy of Christ consciousness. Filling yourself with joy now in the silence. When you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes.